If you are a poet or an artist, I think a central question you need to be asking yourself is how easy is it for people to find me? Hey guys, my name is Geoff. This is Arts and Offers, the poet podcast that's all about trying to bridge that connection between art and business. It's just me today, and I want to talk about something that happened to me 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago in Columbus, there was a book festival, and during this book festival, it was great. They had an independent author tent with, dozens of authors with their own works. They had author talks, they had panels, they had book signings, they had a bookshop, obviously, and lots of local mags, and even journals from as far as Oregon and Washington were there to just kind of showcase work, literary work, journals, publications, books, naturally. And I took it upon myself to be like, hey, I want to find a way that I can kind of give back to the authors that are here as well. And so what I decided was hey, let's take pictures of the authors as they're interacting with people, take pictures of them with their books. And I was able to get some photos that authors could use, for instance, on their own social media pages, get tagged in and things like that. And as I was going around taking photos, thanks to all those authors who allowed me to do so, one of the things I noticed was that for some authors, I realized it was going to be a little bit challenging to get in touch with them in the future. Specifically, I want to talk a little bit about business cards. So if you are an author or a writer who's considering having a business card, or in the writing world, you'll see bookmarks being used as business cards, just some things that you may want to consider. As someone who wanted to get in touch with some of the authors that I was able to speak with, and honestly found it challenging to do so just because of the cards that are being given out. So a couple of the cards that I saw. Firstly, let's talk about QR codes. So the pictures that I'm taking, I'm going to put on my computer, right, to do editing and things like that, and then sending out. And my computer doesn't really have an easy way to read a QR code. So if I didn't have my phone by me, but I wanted to get in touch with some of the authors, it was really challenging to do so because the only thing that they had on their card was a QR code and no other information whatsoever. So that automatically made things much more challenging on my end to find authors, to get in touch with them. Some authors, in fact, had these bookmarks, and they would have it would be a pretty bookmark. They'd have a design on it, and then at the top it would say, scan me, QR code. It didn't have a name, didn't have an email address, didn't have a social media link, all of these things. The only thing it had was the QR code. So if you're going to spend that money on a bookmark and you want to incorporate a QR code, I understand the ease of that, but you may also want to at least include an email address or a website or a social media link. One of those would be immensely helpful to consider for your business card. Some other things you may want to be thinking about if you're making your own business cards is, by the end of this day, because pretty much every author had something, right? Every author had either a bookmark or a small little broadside or a business card. Every author had that. So then at the end of it, I'm walking around with 30, 35 different business cards, and the people, I could honestly forget who did I get which card from. And so one other thing that you may want to consider when you're making these cards, especially, you're spending these things, depending on the quantity you get, aren't necessarily cheap. It can add up fast. Consider adding a picture of yourself. So that way we have something to attach to the name and to the card. So that way when I see oh yeah, I remember I talked to this author, they had that book. Or if it is a book that you're promoting, maybe having a picture of the book, or even better, maybe a picture of you and the book. So that way we can combine everything together. We're trying to make it as easy as possible for not during the event, but after the event, when people are looking at their cards and they've already had lots of conversations and they're trying to recall that person that they talked to. The more connections you can give me to remind me of that conversation, the easier it is for me to want to reach out to you and to make that connection. So that's something you want to be considering too. So in addition to the QR code, having some social media links or website link. In addition to the QR code, having a picture of your face. Some other things with business cards I noticed. What some people did, if you get business cards, you have a couple different options. You know, you can have rounded corners, you can have a rectangle cut, you can have square cut, you can have all kinds of things. One that you may want to consider if you're doing bookmarks or if you're doing unusual sizes, non-traditional rectangular forms, you may want to be thinking about, well, people are going to be carrying this around in their pocket. You know, so bookmarks, cool idea, but I can tell you that a lot of those bookmarks ended up kind of getting squished or jumbled or wrinkled or whatever you may have you, because I need to squeeze it in my pocket because I'm trying to, you know, get to as many people as possible, not necessarily with the time or with the thinking of like, oh, this is a bookmark, this is nice, let me put it together in my bag so it doesn't lose form or anything like that. So that's another thing to consider if you're using a non-traditional cut. Another option, though, that you have when you're making the business cards, you can decide, hey, is it going to be one-sided or two-sided? One-sided is cheaper because they only print on one side. Two-sided is obviously going to be more expensive, but the thing you need to consider with business cards is that, you know, if people drop it, or if you leave it out on a table and it gets flipped over or something like that, if you don't print on both sides, people are just going to see a white backing. You know, if you had a two-sided, then you could have information on both sides. So it would be good to have some of your contact information and your name on both sides of it, so people, no matter what happens, that you don't control. I don't control if someone puts my card down upside down. You know, I don't control if it falls on the ground, what side it's going to land on. You know, so by going on both sides, that's why it's more expensive. You give yourself more chance to be discovered. Now, some authors were aware of this, so what they did was they printed one side, but then on the other side, they would just kind of tape this little slip of paper that has some additional information on it. Now, it's effective in the sense that, well, now at least you have information on both sides and you're able to save money on your printing costs. What's the cost, though? The cost is that now you're impacting your presentation, because the first side of the card looked great, very professional, had, you know, the gloss, had the graphics on it, had the name and the special font, but then the other side is almost this like Times New Roman slip that you printed from your house that was taped on, you know, with not even like translucent tape. It's like you see like the tape stuff, like the whole presentation just feels very compromised. On the one side it looks great, on the second side it looks like you just kind of threw this together in 2 seconds. So in my opinion, it would be worth it to consider going for the two-sided printing, because then again you can mitigate for issues if the card goes on in a direction that you don't intend. It's going to cost a bit more, but the overall presentation skills are also going to be elevated. I'm going to take you more seriously because you're taking your work more seriously. You're investing more into it. You know, in all honesty, even if let's say I print out 1,000 cards one-sided, am I going to print out 1,000 paper slips and tape them on? Is that what I'm doing too? So, you know, yeah, you're spending a bit more money, but you're saving a lot more time and effort. So I don't know. I think it's worth it spending the extra dollars on two-sided printing. Some other little things that made the business cards challenging during the book fair event. Sometimes links weren't working. just straight up not working. Or sometimes people would put a social media handle, but then you would type in the handle and not be able to find the person. So if you are only on specific platforms, for instance, one person I'm thinking about, they put a handle that you commonly see, for instance, for Instagram, but they don't actually have an Instagram. They only have like an X Twitter account. So if you're searching on Instagram, you're not going to find them. So if you're only on a single platform, it can be helpful to actually don't just put the handle, put the actual platform that you're on. Seems reasonable. So that way I know that, oh, I don't have a Twitter, I'm not going to be able to find you. You know, or, oh, I'm not on Instagram, I'm not going to be able to find you. Or, oh, I now know, you know, where specifically I can locate you. social media sites having that, even if you don't necessarily like social media, I will say social media is much easier to contact people on as well. Some people are just putting website addresses, and your website address has your contact form and things like that. And you may be like, well, I can also maybe get people onto my newsletter and things like that. But I think when we're doing these sorts of exchanges, we want to be thinking about trying to minimize friction. We're trying to come to our audience where our audience is. And then once we establish that level of trust and that relationship, then we can, if they're interested, give people the choice of signing up for instance, like a newsletter or, filling out a contact form on a site. It's just much easier, though, to contact people on the social media. You can find people, send them a request, see what they're up to, especially more recently. On the website, a lot of people have not updated their websites in significant portions of time. Hopefully their social media is the place where they're giving more updates, sending pictures, maybe not necessarily from this week, but hopefully something from this month, and really hopefully at least something from this year. Whereas some people, you go to their websites, they have links that are outdated and are now broken. They designed them, 5 years ago, and it looks it. All the publication, nothing's recent. So having that social media presence, I think having that as the point of contact on a business card is going to be much more helpful if you're serious about people, your readers, being able to contact you. So looking back on this experience, if I just had to kind of highlight what an ideal business card would have been for me as someone who was just finding out about these authors for the first time and was interested in reaching out to find more information about them after the event concluded, these are the things I would have found most helpful. First of all, a photo of who the author is that I spoke to. Underneath that photo, having a link to a website. Under that, having a link to at least one primary social media handle would have been very helpful for me. After that, maybe having a line that would kind of indicate what the work is primarily focused on. Not just saying like author or writer. If you're like a horror fiction writer, mentioning something about that. If you're focused on autobiography of, like entrepreneurs, something like that, making that clear. If you're a poet, not just writing poet, but writing, short form poetry, like short form nature poetry. So that way I have an idea of something to actually tie you to. What's the actual genre in the niche that you're actually in the literary field. After that, I would consider a QR code if I'm trying to also have that option as well. However, QR code honestly would be towards the bottom of my list. Those other social media things would actually be much more helpful for me if I'm doing this exercise again. I want to take a moment briefly to talk about another type of business card, a digital business card. I think like Dot has one that's popular. I was talking with a digital marketer and she was talking about how she has a Dot card. But one of the considerations she was also saying was, she's like, man, I have this Dot card. It cost me $15. What it does is you can just tap it against people's phones and then it automatically brings up your website, your social media links and things like that, almost like a link tree. The disadvantage of it is that, people, you use your Dot card, people friend you during the event, and then after the event is over, they don't have anything tangible. So they have to physically remember like, oh yeah, I met this one person, I got their contact info. Let me see the friend requests I sent out, earlier in the day. So there's this issue that comes up because one of the nice things about actually having a physical business card is you can refer back to it. So you take them during the event, and then after the event is over, you can then kind of see them and then go through them, and you have something to remember by. The Dot card removes that. So if you forget that you added someone, they can just get buried in your contacts, never to be referenced again. So I hope as you're trying to work on being discovered and establishing those connections, networking, business cards I think are a very valuable tool still today, but you want to make sure you're formatting it right to give whoever it is you're handing it over to the best advantage and the easiest ways to get in touch with you again in the future. Hey, if you found this discussion helpful in our conversation about that link between art, poetry, writing, and business, be sure to check out more episodes of the podcast, Arts and Offers.